Let's talk about verbal processing fatigue and why deep conversations feel like physical labor for autistic spouses. Have you ever been in the middle of an important conversation with your ASD spouse when suddenly they seem to disappear? They're still sitting right there, they're still listening, but their eyes kind of glaze over, their responses get shorter, and eventually they say something like, well, I don't know, or I need a break, or can we talk about this later? And if you're the neurotypical spouse, that can feel devastating. You might be thinking, well, they don't care, or they're avoiding me, or they're shutting me out again, or they don't want to connect. But what if that's not what's happening at all? What if the silence you're experiencing isn't emotional withdrawal? What if it's neurological exhaustion? So today, we're going to explore a phenomenon I call verbal processing fatigue and why deep conversations can feel like physical labor for many autistic spouses. Because when couples understand what's actually happening inside the autistic nervous system, blame begins to dissolve and practical solutions become possible. So let's begin. One of the biggest misunderstandings in neurodiverse marriages is that both partners assume conversation costs roughly the same amount of energy, but it doesn't. For many neurotypical people, conversation is relatively automatic. The brain rapidly decodes facial expressions, vocal tone, body language, context, emotional nuance, implied meaning with little conscious effort. Much of this processing happens beneath awareness. It's efficient, it's streamlined, it's almost effortless. For many autistic adults, however, the same tasks may require significantly more conscious processing. Imagine two people walking the same distance. One is on a smooth sidewalk, and the other is hiking uphill through mud carrying a backpack. Both arrive at the same destination, but one expended far more energy getting there. This is often what intimate conversation feels like inside the autistic brain. While the neurotypical spouse experiences connection, the autistic spouse may simultaneously be performing dozens of mental calculations. What emotion is being expressed? What does that facial expression mean? What response is expected of me right now? Am I misunderstanding something again? Let's see, what happened earlier that relates to this? What emotion am I feeling? How do I put that into words? What if I say the wrong thing? What if they interpret it negatively? The conversation that appears simple from the outside can become a complex cognitive exercise on the inside. And eventually, the brain gets tired, very tired. And this is where verbal processing fatigue begins. Now, let's talk about something that rarely gets discussed. Communication is not just psychological, it's neurological. Every conversation requires energy. Every word requires processing. Every emotional topic increases cognitive load. When enough demands accumulate, the nervous system begins conserving resources. The same way muscles fatigue after physical exertion, cognitive systems fatigue after prolonged processing. Think about how your body feels after moving furniture for 3 hours. Your muscles become weaker, your coordination decreases, your performance drops. You don't stop because you're lazy. You stop because your body has reached capacity. Something remarkably similar happens neurologically. As processing demands increase, the autistic brain may begin showing signs of overload. For example, responses become slower, word retrieval becomes harder, thinking becomes less organized, emotional awareness decreases, decision-making becomes difficult, and eventually, speech itself can become exhausting. This is why some autistic spouses report feeling physically drained after intense conversations. Not metaphorically drained, actually drained. They may experience headaches, muscle tension, brain fog, exhaustion, a desire to sleep, difficulty concentrating, or a strong need for solitude afterward. The ASD body is responding to real neurological exertion. And this matters because many couples misinterpret these signs. The neurotypical spouse sees withdrawal. The autistic spouse experiences overload. Both are observing something real, but they're assigning very different meanings to it. Let's examine one of the most common marriage scenarios that I see. A neurotypical spouse says, well, we need to talk. She wants to talk because maybe she's hurt, maybe she's feeling lonely, maybe she's seeking connection. So the conversation begins. 10 minutes pass, 20 minutes pass, 30 minutes pass, 60 minutes pass. The discussion becomes increasingly emotional and increasingly abstract. Feelings are discussed, intentions are questioned, relationship dynamics are analyzed, subtle meanings are explored. At some point, the autistic spouse begins running low on processing resources. And here's the problem. Most people don't recognize the signs early enough. Instead of the ASD spouse saying, My brain is reaching capacity. Can we pause this for a minute? They become quiet, defensive, irritable, detached, or seemingly uninterested. Now, the neurotypical spouse interprets this as emotional disengagement, and the autistic spouse feels increasingly overwhelmed. Now, both partners feel misunderstood, and conflict escalates. Not because either person has bad intentions, but because neither partner recognizes the neurological reality unfolding underneath the conversation. This is why I often tell couples that communication problems are not always communication problems. Most of the time, they're energy management problems. Think about it this way. If someone had a physical condition that made walking more exhausting, we wouldn't insist that they keep walking indefinitely. We would build rest periods into the journey. Yet many couples unknowingly expect conversations to continue long after one partner's cognitive resources have been depleted. Then they wonder why things fall apart. The solution isn't less communication. The solution is more sustainable communication. So what does sustainable communication actually look like? First, both partners need a new framework. Silence is not always rejection. Withdrawal is not always avoidance. Sometimes it's neurological fatigue. This shift alone can dramatically reduce resentment. The neurotypical spouse stops personalizing every pause. The autistic spouse stops feeling ashamed of their limitations. Second, learn to identify early warning signs. For autistic spouses, these signs might include difficulty finding words, increased confusion, feeling mentally crowded, a desire to escape, growing irritable, loss of emotional awareness, difficulty tracking the conversation. The earlier these signs are recognized, the easier it becomes to prevent burnout. Third, normalize structured breaks. Many couples fear breaks because they associate them with abandonment. But a break is not abandonment. A break is maintenance. You don't stop a conversation because the relationship isn't important. You stop because the relationship is important enough to protect the quality of the conversation. Sometimes 20 minutes of recovery can save 2 hours of conflict. Fourth, reduce simultaneous demands. Many deep conversations require multiple forms of processing at once. Listening, interpreting emotions, managing your own emotions, reading facial expressions, choosing words, predicting reactions, problem solving. That's a tremendous amount of cognitive labor. Slowing down reduces the load. Shorter sentences help. Specific examples help. One topic at a time helps. Also, written communication can help tremendously. Many autistic individuals process complex information more effectively when given time to read, reflect, and respond. Finally, remember that communication capacity varies. A spouse may be capable of a 2-hour discussion on Saturday morning and only 15 minutes after a stressful workday. That doesn't mean their love changed. It means their available neurological resources changed. Now, those are very different things. Now, I want to speak very directly to both partners. If you're the neurotypical spouse, your desire for connection is valid. Your need to be heard matters. Your loneliness is real. But your ASD partner's silence may not mean what you've been told it means. Sometimes silence is exhaustion. Sometimes it's recovery. Sometimes it's the nervous system asking for a pause. And if you're the autistic spouse, I want you to hear this. Needing recovery doesn't mean somehow you're a bad spouse. Communication fatigue is not a character flaw. You are not failing because deep conversations cost you energy. The goal is not to become someone else. The goal is to understand your limits and communicate them before overload takes over. The healthiest neurodiverse marriages are not built on forcing identical communication styles. They're built on understanding different nervous systems. So when couples stop viewing silence as a rejection and start viewing it as information, something remarkable happens. The fight against each other begins to disappear, and both partners can finally begin solving the real problem together. Not a lack of love, not a lack of commitment, but a difference in how their brains spend energy. And that's a challenge that can be understood, accommodated, and navigated as a team. Now, if this describes your marriage, let me know in the comments. Have you ever mistaken neurological fatigue for emotional withdrawal? Or have you had your own exhaustion misunderstood by your partner? I'd love to hear your experience. Please like, subscribe, and take good care of yourselves and each other. I'll see you in the next video. Would you like to schedule a paid private coaching session? This will be in the form of a face-to-face Zoom call. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this Calendly link. If you click on that link, It'll open up my calendar. You can pick the available days and times that works for your schedule. You'll get a follow-up email immediately after purchasing a session that will have the Zoom link that coincides with the day and time that you picked. I will get an email too that you scheduled a session, and I will be available on that exact day and time, and we will talk. I look forward to working with you.